Hey guys, Austin Ruthven here, also known as Nitsa for Super Mario Vlogs, or Super Mario Numbers Vlogs. So just to keep in mind that I want to try to keep these videos unedited, and unless of course I messed up so many times, then I will have to edit it, which hopefully I don't do. So anyway guys, this is the second episode of Super Mario Numbers Vlogs, the Bloodless List. So this is chapter 2 of the first season, and if you haven't seen the first episode, then click right here. This is pretty much the video of me talking about the first chapter, the 7 Hearts. Now for this chapter, it's called the Bloodless List, and so this chapter was pretty interesting because in the first chapter, it was only run by 2 people, which is me, Nitsa94, and 49 Falcons, and we worked pretty well because for the most part, 49 Falcons' main focus was pretty much on the plot with the heroes, whereas my plot was more on the events of the rape crimes in Sacramento. And you're like, whoa, dude, rape crimes? Well, just go back to the first vlog if you're confused, so just so you know what's going on. Anyway, so the Bloodless List. So it does have the same writers, so Nitsa94 and 49 Falcons, but it has a third writer by the name of Tim Lemons, and he's one of the main writers in this. So Tim Lemons makes his first chapter in this chapter, chapter 2. So with that said, let's talk about the Bloodless List. So there's almost like 7 Hearts. There's like 2 different plots going on, but the 2 plots eventually combine into like the same plot. Like the 2 situations going on are actually have some sort of relation to each other. And like from the 7 Hearts, the 2 cases that we were revolving around eventually all connected together in the end. In this chapter, it's pretty much the same, and in some aspects that can actually be an up and downside to, well, this chapter, the Bloodless List, and that's mostly because when you're working off of a role-playing story, this is around the point where we weren't really messaging each other to find out like what our intentions are and all that. So anyway, plot. Okay, so in the last bit of 7 Hearts, what happened is that after Mario and Luigi defeat Dr. Pipazoid, Knuckles comes into the Mushroom Kingdom world and says to Tails and Amy that Shadow has gone crazy and that he went inside a dark portal, that he claims that he's actually he's seeing Maria. Now, if you're like, okay, fanfics, I'm out of here, well, just hang around, because there's actually a reason why he's seeing Maria. And no, this is not another addition to Shadow's past. I mean, I know some of you actually hated the Shadow the Hedgehog game, and I can actually understand that because it can get repetitive when you're doing Westopolis over again, but I actually kind of like the game just because I think it's a dark past that is told actually pretty well, even though they did go for the alien cliche, but to be honest, that never really bothered me. But, okay, I digress. So Shadow is called into this portal where he ends up at a place called Castle Death, where he meets this organization known as the Bloodless, and the people around the table, there's a total of 13, and they bring on a 14 member. And afterwards, this girl named Alice comes to take Shadow away from that place, so that way she can actually use him to help him defeat the Bloodless, because the Bloodless is pretty much the main antagonist of Season 1. So the explanation of why the heck Shadow is seeing Maria, well, it's pretty much because there's actually 2 people that represent Maria in this Bloodless world. One is actually the leader of the entire Bloodless group, Korea, or I'm just going to call her Korea because you pretty much have Maria replace the M with an X. However you pronounce that. Kasuria, I'm just going to call her Korea. And then there's another girl called Alice, except they represent Maria from Shadow's past. So it's like, wait, what? Okay, so there is an explanation behind it. So we find out more about the Bloodless tribe, And we actually find other characters like, there's one character named Maxio, who actually represents Mario. And there's even someone else called like Luigi, something like that. It sounds so weird when you actually include in the X's in their names. I mean, there's even like Saxus. Jeez, that sounds so dirty. But Saxus represents Samus. I don't know, represents Chrono. Yeah, so there's like a total of 14 different members, and each of them represents basically what we call ideas. And how does that work? Well, in the AA, okay, this is back when we didn't really have an explanation on how, you know, their lives are told into video games until Season 2 finally explained why. So in this chapter, it does break the fourth wall, unfortunately, by saying fictional video game characters. But I think you can actually interpret it in a way pretty fairly where it doesn't break the fourth wall. Where it's one of those worlds that is almost like the Kingdom Hearts world. In fact, it's really exactly like the Kingdom Hearts worlds, where the Bloodless are pretty much the nobodies, and I don't remember what they were, but I think they were like they were called the Heartless or something, that represents these other creatures that also do appear in this chapter called the Metudes. I don't know how we're pronouncing the name, so, you know, you just know how to spell it, but you never really take time to try to pronounce the name, you know? So, yeah, basically there's a whole plot with Shadow getting involved with the Bloodless, but when he actually goes into Castle Death, he actually gains some sort of darkness inside of him that is trying to consume him. And the more he actually lets this darkness consume him, he's going to pretty much be corrupted by it. But the upside to it is that he's given two powers with it. The first is that he's able to wield a blade known as the Soul Blade. And the second is that he's able to create portals by will. Create a portal where you can actually go to any world he wants. And it's dark stuff, but he's been able to use it to his advantage. And because he can't really control the darkness that is inside of him, he has to use a blindfold, which is kind of interesting because he kind of has Shadow behind a blindfold. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to fight here, I'm just going to fight here, I'm just going to fight here, yeah. Okay, I'm just going to presume you're the bad guy because I just know shit. Okay, anyway, I shouldn't swear. Anyway, yeah, it's kind of interesting how it works. I mean, at first when I was writing the Bloodless List, I was kind of just skimming over the plot and such because it's really complicated, and it still is complicated. But the ironic thing is that the plot I've written, and eventually Tim helped me on, is actually more complicated than the Bloodless plot. The other plot basically centers around a toad named Cole Buck, who is a rich toad in Toad Town, and he gets murdered. He gets shot 3 times, and then the police find Wario with the same gun that killed Cole Buck and a bottle of beer right beside Wario in his motorcycle near Cole Buck's place. And basically Wario is saying, I didn't commit the murder and such, and he does confess that, you know, I did go to a bar and such, but I've only had half a beer, and at this point you're like, oh, dude, come on. There's no pubs in the Mushroom Kingdom. Well, trust me, if the world was real, there's bound to be a pub, so shut up. Anyway, so Mario and Luigi, with the help of some other people, including Otacon, Ash, and Donkey Kong, they, mostly Mario and Luigi, they try to help Wario by trying to find the evidence and such to try to prove that Wario is not the killer and that he was not responsible for Cole Buck's death. But of course, yeah, the bartender who is like saying a different story, and then you have the sheriff who, of course, is like, she's like he's not really opened up to like possibilities of Wario like not being the murderer and such. And there's a reason behind that, which I won't spoil because I want you guys to read the plots. And the reason why this plot is actually more complicated than the Bloodless plot, I mean, the only reason why the Bloodless plot is complicated is mostly because it centers around ideas of these characters, that the ideas are given to these worlds and that's how they're created, which in a sense actually does work to the mythology that is in Super Mario Numbers. But then you also have the worlds that actually do exist, but their stories are told within the form of video games, and it's explained in Season 2 that it's done by prophets. Like, the prophets are able to tell the stories of these worlds, whereas there are some other worlds where pretty much it's created by ideas and such. It's almost like kids believing in Santa Claus. Like, if we have enough kids believing in Santa Claus, then Santa Claus is real. You know, an example, like, that is an example. Where did I leave off? Okay, the plot with Wario being framed for murder and such, it's really complicated because our heroes are going to like so many different locations, and it's either a waste of time or they actually do find something, but they find some codes and such. Like, they find a code where it has numbers like 0 and 1, and some other writer named Master Sephiroth, I actually forgot, also interfered with this plot. And by interfere, I mean totally destroy it. No, I'm just kidding. She pretty much decided to put a plot where pretty much the 1 to 0 codes are binary code, which in a sense would make sense and such, because 1 and 0s are usually like associated with binary code, but it turns out that it has nothing to do with binary code. So there's like a clue later on where they find out that the 1 and 0s are really just mimics of the lines and dots used for Morse code, which, to be honest, it actually kind of seems, it's kind of funny how they actually find it and such, but you kind of just have to work with it. So, yet the codes that they use to actually try to find the Bloodless List is kind of really complicated. I mean, you get invested for the most part, but for the most part, they're kind of going to these different areas, and usually sometimes it's a waste of time, but in a sense, that does feel realistic when you're doing an investigation. And later it turns out that the Bloodless plot and the Wario being framed plot actually combines into a whole entire war where the Bloodless are able to corrupt Toad Town by framing other people and pretty much at one point taking over the kingdom, but of course end up failing. But what they do succeed on doing is causing a riot in Toad Town. Now, how we described it is that we described the Toads killing each other and such, and it's like, okay, if it's like a riot happening in Toad Town near a royalty place, then I guess that could be believable and such. But of course, you know, you played Super Mario, the Super Mario series and such. You've been in Toad Town before. You've seen how nice they are, and you can't really see it coming. Which, of course, that's told in video game form, so we have no idea if they actually have a pub, you know. But basically, it's actually told that the riot is actually being encouraged by 4 imposters, and that these 4 imposters are actually responsible for Kolbuck's death. And these 4 imposters are eventually revealed on who they are and such. They're eventually revealed to be these creatures called Metudes and such, which I really want you guys to read the plot and such. So during the plot and such, we actually had one moment where we had our heroes go to the Rabbids world, where basically that's the spin-off to the Rayman series, and then I'm like, oh geez, I totally forgot about that. I mean, this is gonna be stupid, but it kind of, yeah, I mean, for the most part, you're able to work with it and such, and Rayman actually makes an appearance, which is interesting, because for the first chapter, which we're currently writing right now for Season 3, I basically introduced the Rayman world, and I thought, okay, I'm the first one to introduce Rayman. Well, apparently not. Apparently Rayman did appear in a previous chapter, and I totally forgot about it, and that's mostly because I never played any of the Rayman games around the time that chapter was made, so I totally forgot Rayman even appeared in the Bloodless List. And Rayman actually does play somewhat of a role and such, even though he's only in like 3 posts and such. And I think I'm able to interpret this into the plot that I'm currently writing. But anyway, without spoiling too much, I will definitely say that the Bloodless List is actually a complicated chapter. I mean, more complicated than Seven Hearts, believe it or not. I mean, for the most part, you got them going here and there, but there's actually like progress to it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was progress to the Seven Hearts as well, but they're jumping from different worlds and such, and it seems like they're not getting anything done. But here it does seem like they're getting something done, and you get some sort of investment, and it's actually much more darker. I mean, don't get me wrong, the writing still is kind of a little poor, but it definitely is better than what we got in Seven Hearts. And it definitely does help that we got 3 writers instead of 2. So yeah, Tim Lemons, pretty much, he started with this chapter, and ever since then he's continued on, and the 3 of us have been the main writers ever since, until we got our 2 new writers for Season 2, JR Pictures and Robin1234. That's kind of a weird new username. Anyway, okay. Trying to remember what else was included. Okay, so with the whole Bloodless plot and such, they're basically ideas of, like, you know, these characters and such, but they're counterparts. They don't have blood running through their veins, so they only see black and white and barely any shades of gray. But because they're following Korea, who was actually outraged that she couldn't get any blood, then that's the reason why she's actually causing all this chaos and such, because she's outraged for that this council, which does get explained later in like the later chapters and such, was outraged that she couldn't get blood, because upon getting blood, the Bloodless, now becoming Bloodful, are able to actually have some sort of emotion and have some sort of understanding and be able to control themselves and such, but also being, like, you know, fully living and such. Which the only Bloodless that has been able to actually get blood in her system was Alice, who actually represents the other Maria, to the girl that pretty much saved Shadow and got herself shot by GUN. So yeah, this chapter so far, it's actually definitely a good second chapter. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good second chapter to, like, after Seven Hearts. I mean, you at first it seems like it's kind of like, you know, a whole other plot, but it actually works its way into the events of, like, Dr. Pipazoid that we got introduced to at the end of Chapter 1. But also, Dr. Math makes a return in this. Like, Dr. Math, who was in the first chapter, actually got killed at the end of the first chapter. But for some unknown reason that she doesn't even know, she got revived in the second chapter. And yeah, that's pretty much, I think that's pretty much all I need to sum up about the Bloodless List. I mean, the second chapter is a good chapter. I'm trying to remember what else I needed to talk about in terms of flaws or anything like that, because for the most part, the only flaw I can say is that, I mean, despite some bad writing, the plots are kind of complicated. And not just with the Bloodless plot, but the whole plot with the heroes trying to prove Wario's innocence by going through all these codes and all these trials that Kobach has set out to them. To find this list, actually I don't think I explained this moment of the plot, to actually find this list called the Bloodless List, where it actually indicates all the 13 members of the Bloodless tribe, while also telling them the spies and the non-allied Bloodless, including Alice. And according to, and when they do find the Bloodless List eventually, Dr. Pipazoid is not mentioned on it. So, yeah, the second plot definitely is a huge step up from Seven Hearts and such. I mean, it has its flaws and all that, but for the most part, it is actually, like, a good chapter. And